Welcome to Applied Intelligence, a conversation at the intersection of people, technology, and getting stuff done. And now, here's your host, Imtiaz Ahmed.
Hi everyone, welcome to Applied Intelligence. This week I have a really fun guest, Jack Lindberg from the Mars Agency. So Jack is the Director of Media and Insights and Analytics at the Mars Agency and the lead product lead on Noctis, which is an AI co-pilot for Amazon Marketing Cloud. He is the 2023 Amazon Ads Partner Ambassador and a former professional opera singer as well. So there's just so much to talk about with Jack and his very colorful background. I also met up with Jack a couple of years ago while he was at PadView, which is another great e-commerce partner. So yeah, looking forward to this lovely conversation. And
thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
So the question I ask all my guests on my podcast, and I love asking this question, which is, if there was an autobiography of your life and it had 5 chapters, what would the chapter titles of each chapter be in your autobiography, Jack? Just so the audience gets to know who you are.
A really good question. I think for anyone my age to say that they have 5 chapters of an autobiography would be a little bit disingenuous. I'm 26, so going out in the world and saying, wow, I've really lived 5 chapters worth of a life might be kind of hard. I think I would be at best at the beginning of chapter 3. Okay. So I would sort of think about the chapters as transitioning from being a professional musician to the world of e-commerce, sort of getting my bearings, my footing in the world of e-commerce, and then what I'm doing now, which is really like those initial opportunities of going out and trying to make waves and seeing what's happening. I think my journey to e-com, if there's anything I've learned, is that everyone comes to this field because it's so nascent, from really random, totally off the beaten path, other fields, and listening to my story about coming from professional singing, if you talk to people in e-commerce, isn't actually that strange. Like I have one friend who's was a professional portrait photographer before coming into e-com. Okay. So I did my undergrad and my master's degree in opera performance. I studied at the Guildhall School in London in the UK. I was completing my master's right when COVID hit. I had my first professional season of, swinging for the fences, being a freelance opera singer in Europe, sort of rolling. And all of those gigs got canceled. I moved back home to New Jersey at my mom's house. And 3 months in, she was like, I need you to get out of the house and get a job. And the feeling was mutual. There's only so much you want to live with your parents as much as you love them. So I, with my 2 music degrees and no skills, I was sort of in a tough spot. And luckily, my godmother is a career coach, Debbie Walter. She teaches at Stanford Business School and runs her own consulting firm called Red Baboon Consulting in Silicon Valley for professional career coaching. She's my godmother, and I called her up and said, Aunt Debbie, I'm calling in all of my X years of favors right now. Cash them all in.
Cash them in.
Yeah. And I think I ended up trading her SAT tutoring for her daughter as a swap, but she talked me through basically figuring out what the next steps were. Like, what did I like? What did I not like? Sort of soft skills could I play up in that first interview to say, yes, I don't know how to use Excel because they don't teach you that in music conservatory, but how do I get my foot in that door? And also how to pound the pavement and talk to people and learn about what's out there. I didn't know what analytics was, or I didn't know what a product manager was. And I was like, how was I supposed to know that was a career that I wanted if I didn't know it existed? So I spent a lot of time just reaching out to random people and saying, hey, can I talk to you for 20 minutes about your job? No ask from you, just tell me about what you do and what you like about it and what you don't, so I can learn about what's out there to see what might fit.
Can I ask you a question about that? How many people turned you down for that ask?
Basically no one. I would say 80% of people, 90% of people said yes. If I've learned anything, it's that people love to talk about themselves. And if you go in and say, hey, I want to give you the opportunity just to tell me about yourself, and I'll ask you questions, most people say yes. Because the key is you're not asking them to do anything. You're asking them to tell you about them.
And this is the thing, right? Like a lot of times in our lives, we're too scared to ask for help. We're too scared to like really leverage our relationships and or just, reach out to someone and say, hey, I'm going through this thing. Can you just help me through it? And, I've had a similar experience every time that I've kind of had a career issue or personal thing that I'm trying to figure out. Anytime I've reached out to a friend or like somebody relatively in the know about that topic or area, everyone's always said yes. Here's 20 minutes of my time or half an hour of my time to figure that out. So yeah.
No, it definitely,
Sorry,
yes. People are generally much nicer than we give them credit for. And people will say yes if you ask them for help, especially if it's something that they're uniquely positioned to help you with.
Sure.
So I think I had maybe 25 or 30 of those conversations of, tell me about whatever you do. And I was like, well, that gave me a lot of lists of things that I really didn't want to do. And e-commerce was sort of the best bet, because if there's anything I've seen, it's that prior experience in this field, because it changes so much, doesn't help that much. That being a 15-year e-commerce professional, if you're not up to date on the cutting edge, you're behind, right? And that sort of shelf life of knowledge doesn't maintain the same way it would for banking or something like that.
And we work, and I'm sure you work across multiple clients now, but even in CPG, right? Like the way things have been done within CPG have not really changed that much, especially from a supply chain. And, maybe the marketing side of the equation has changed with the advent of Facebook and Google. But in terms of how consumers are purchasing products and brands, how they're discovering products and brands, how they're experiencing products and brands has shifted and is continuing to shift. And we're going to get into Amazon Marketing Cloud even later, but, the partnerships that Amazon is leading within this space right now is only going to further fuel that change. So I know I'm taking too much thunder from our conversation later, but yeah, it certainly 100% agree with you that, having not being able to unlearn what you've learned in your career thus far, and then picking up new skills. If you can't do that, e-com's.
I definitely agree. And in my first job out of grad school was literally as an intern at a small agency in New York, like learning how to manage Amazon PPC ads. And I swear to God, I told my boss, like my then boss in that interview, I don't know anything about this, but I promise you I can learn. And I think that held true. And then I shifted over to working at PackView. PackView is filled with some of the smartest people in the industry. A bunch of really dear friends are still there. But my first role there was in customer success, which basically was you're the person people ask questions to about e-com retail media, and you're seeing a huge wide swath of accounts from all different types of verticals, all different levels of expertise on the client side, different agencies. And it was sort of a great trial by fire to say, you don't know anything about this and you need to come in and figure out how you can be helpful in that half an hour or hour to the person on the other end of the phone, and know your stuff cold to be a valuable resource during that window. And what I found was I was answering the same questions over and over and over again and thought, there must be a better way to do this. And the way to do, solve all of those same problems at scale is to move from talking to the customer to building things that talk to the customer. And then I shifted over to the product team at PackView, where I did a lot of work on the Amazon DSP and Amazon Marketing Cloud products and helped out a little other places. And then most recently in April, jumped over to the Mars agency to pick up Amazon Marketing Cloud efforts there. And most recently have launched Noctis in collaboration with some of our friends at Analytic Index, which I'm really proud of. It's an AI co-pilot. Basically, we're using a large language model to retrieve all the information you'd never need about Amazon Marketing Cloud. So ask it questions. It knows the answer about what does this field mean? Should I use table 1 or table 2? And even more concretely, ask it a question in English, and it gives you back the code you need to get the answer. It's very cool.
Based on your LinkedIn posts as well, Jack, over the last few months, even using ChatGPT to write the SQL queries to go over Amazon Marketing Cloud and just the basic stuff, right? That was super helpful for me. and now seeing it in a product that's, fully scalable, usable across multiple platforms or multiple use cases within Amazon is super
Thank
cool.
you.
So,
Yeah,
well done.
I was something we'll talk about later, but with the OpenAI releasing this OpenAI agents feature, you can basically build your own custom LLM powered tool. There was a lot of concern from some of the people in our company that didn't really understand the product, as well as those folks in the weeds. Like, hey, can someone go build this via an OpenAI agent? And the answer was, I tried it, and you can't. It's really hard. There are a lot of companies out there that are using AI in a way that our VC friends call a thin wrapper, where it's like basically a prompt and maybe a little bit of data manipulation on top of a LLM. Something with that level of sophistication, OpenAI basically killed overnight. And you need to be adding value on top of that to actually be competitive in the market and not be killed by the proliferation of these sort of agents.
Yeah, and I don't know. I also think the base level of consumer or customer understanding of these products is massively increasing very quickly over time as well. So the snake oil salesman who's trying to basically give you a user interface with a little bit of prompting that generates, specific outputs for you, that's not going to fly. I mean, maybe you made a few sales now, but yeah, that lunch is going to get
I
eaten
definitely
very
agree.
quickly by a lot of players. Let's go into some detail and some clarification of what data clean rooms are, what Amazon Marketing Cloud is for the audience. It's a relatively new technology. I think data clean rooms have been around for a bit of time, and obviously Amazon Marketing Cloud has been around for a while, but certainly making a lot more noise over the last 2 years since Unboxed, I want to say 2 years ago, and now the latest Unboxed conference where I want to say almost, it felt like 80% of the announcements were around what Amazon Marketing Cloud is. So if you didn't take it seriously previously, you should take it seriously now. But Jack, what's your definition of what?
Yeah, I've had to explain this to a lot of people, and I try to do it two ways, depending on the audience. So I'll do both here, just for the sake of the audience. The technical definition is basically there's a scenario in which you have two data providers, company A, company B, and they know that there's a valuable output from the aggregation of their two data sets, but they're not willing to share the raw source material with the other party. A common example of this would be like a researcher and health data. My mom's a public health professor. This is something that someone could do in her field. For example, I'd want to know how many people who live within 15 miles of an oil well have cancer relative to people who don't live near an oil well. And you could use that data from a partner in a data clean room to say, hey, I can get anonymous aggregations with some privacy controls to sift through that data, but I can't ask what's Joe Blow's address. You can't reveal that level of PII. What Amazon has done that's kind of different is in most data clean rooms, there are three parties at minimum: data partner A, data partner B, and the intermediary, that clean room host. Amazon has decided that they're going to be two sides of that three-way relationship and say they're going to be a data provider providing the Amazon ads data signals, and they're using the AWS architecture to be the host. And then you as the advertiser can add in your own data as you see fit. The more fun way to describe it is thinking about my favorite episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, where there's a great scene where Andy Samberg decides he's going to buy a DJ turntable. And very much like data clean rooms are like that, where the table itself is the architecture and the different records you place on are the data sets, and you're mixing them together to get some sort of aggregate output that is different, unique, and hopefully more helpful and better than the source input you have. In that episode, he ends up trying to mix two klezmer records, and it goes horribly wrong. And I think that's what most people's experience like using data clean rooms is. If you put in garbage data where you don't know how to get data out effectively, you're not going to get anything useful from the clean room itself. It's an enabling technology, not a spoon feeding of the right answers.
Yeah. And I think let's call it the advertising industry and the media industry, one of the paradigms has always been pushing ads and pushing more media and more creative, right? And now you kind of have to balance the madmen with the math men. And this is all math, right? Like in the sense that this is all enabling analytics technology that allows you to look at historical performance, allows you to look at future scenario planning of if you changed something within your media signals. And then finally, it enables you to activate audiences on the fly and do like audience activation in real time. It doesn't necessarily help you with the art side of the equation, right? So if you have an agency partner that is very focused on the art side of the equation and doesn't know how to balance the math side of the equation, you're not necessarily going to win here. And similarly, if you're too focused on the math and too focused on the numbers of your, campaign performance, media spend, etc., and you don't look at the creative side of this equation as well at the same time, then this is not going to work either. So this is what I find is fascinating because, you studied music in your past life. I studied visual arts in my past life and math. But for me, this is a really cool amalgamation of two fields that, from a marketing point of view, is the synergy between the art of the possible versus how creatively can you find customer problems that exist and solve them through an enabling technology as well as ad creative that actually really works within that scenario as well.
Yeah, I think to add to your point, I think the data within a data clean room is really good at telling you the what and the how, not so good at telling you the why.
Yep, exactly. And this is where you need humans, right? Like until we have an LLM that can essentially be a brand marketer and or someone that really understands why people do something because of other causal signals. You really do need humans to interpret all of this data and turn it into useful information/insights to actually do something with this.
Definitely agree.
So what really sets, outside of the two parts of the three-way relationship, what really sets Amazon Marketing Cloud apart from every other data clean room out there in the market? I know some of the retailers already have data clean rooms and have had data clean rooms for a while, but what really makes Amazon different?
So I think what makes Amazon data clean room super different outside of the infrastructure piece is the way you interact with it. I've had a lot of conversations with other retail media partners or other retailers that are seeing the traction and press that Amazon Marketing Cloud has gotten and saying, hey, we need to step up our game with regard to clean rooms. And I think they are taking the opposite approach. Amazon's clean room is a code-first interface. You need to know how to code to see value from the platform, by and large. They've done some work to start rolling out no code or limited coding solutions that allow you to access some templated types of data. But what we're seeing from other clean room partners out in the space is something that I would describe as more greatest hits, where your access to the source tables to say, what's here so I can make up any use case in the world is much more limited. It's like, here are the 10 things we think you might want, and here's a partner that's going to show you a dashboard to access them, rather than saying, here's our API, go nuts, which is sort of Amazon's approach. And I think those are really targeted at different types of people. Like my colleagues who are expert media strategists and don't know how to code would probably benefit much more from a platform that shows them the top 10 use cases, rather than someone like me who much prefers to look at the data and figure out for myself what I can do, rather than being spoon-fed every use case.
Of course. And I think, Amazon's a tech company first before it is anything else, right? So I think the quality of documentation that they give to highly technical people really enables people to kind of just come up with their own thing and a really customized solution to whatever they want. Whereas a lot of other partners will give you a stock standard, get the top things that you might be interested in. And if you work in a certain product category, that is very different to other categories. For example, if you're in like, I don't know, pharmaceuticals and or healthcare, some of these lifetime values or some of the interactions that you have with a brand might only last for a couple of months. And it might not be a sustained relationship with a brand. It's like, for example, the fashion category. There's a lot of one-offs that you might buy from certain brands, but if you're in athletic leisure, there might be more consistent purchase, right? So that customer journey is very different to, I don't know, buying dishwashing tablets, for example, which you might be a lot more of a habitual purchase. So clearly defining what you need and building custom queries and models to mine Amazon Marketing Cloud and then doing something with it, not just looking at what happened, is super interesting. And it's very cool to see so many different use cases coming out of Amazon Marketing Cloud. So let's say if I'm a brand already doing, over $100 million in sales annually on Amazon, what are the key steps that I need to take in order to kind of get started?
Sure. Yeah. So step one is checking to see if you're eligible for Amazon Marketing Cloud. I know. If you're doing over 100 million in sales, I hope you are running upper funnel media through Amazon via Amazon DSP. That is a prerequisite from getting access to Amazon Marketing Cloud. If you manage to do 100 million in sales and run no DSP, my hat's off to you. I would probably still recommend it, not knowing your business. Don't take that as gospel truth, but I would be surprised if you got that far without using any upper funnel media. Then you need to set up an instance, which is basically gathering the identifiers of your sponsored ads account and your DSP accounts and saying, hey, make a clean room that contains this data set to your Amazon rep. From there are really three options or three combinations you could use to get further down into engaging with Amazon Marketing Cloud in a substantive way. So option one is you build out your own team. You hire some folks that know SQL and say, hey, your job is going to be to dig into this data set and figure out how to provide value to the company. That is, by and large, the least common approach. In many ways, I think it's the best approach as someone who's been a tool provider and an agency. I'm going to neg myself and say, do it yourself. That being said,
but that's not for everyone, right? Like, you need to have a base level of understanding of data science, a base level understanding of Amazon DSP, and then you need to be comfortable with hiring your own data scientists, whether that's, internally hiring your own data scientists, but also, and or looking at, data science providers that can really learn and specialize in this stuff. This is some stuff like I've had to do personally, to really maximize Amazon Marketing Cloud. But I know even within my own business, most e-com people or even marketers would not be comfortable doing that because it's just so different to any other form of data that we've had access to.
Yeah, I think also there's, for most organizations, unless you have someone, frankly, I like one of us, who's sort of fluent on either side, where I can talk to a data scientist and I can talk to a marketer and I can sort of figure out what the other means when they're trying to talk to another. Typically, there's a big communication gap in that sort of in-house system where the marketing team is like, this is what data I need these are the questions I have. And the data science team doesn't understand what data answers that question or what you would need to know to figure out whether that's true. If you execute it well, it's definitely the best way. It is a large organizational challenge for folks to execute well.
Of course. And I think it comes down to data literacy on the marketer's part as well. Like, if you understand that the internet is a giant pivot table and each one of the tables has attributes, and those attributes are basically columns. And if you can define those columns and explain to anyone in very simple English what each one of those columns actually means and does in relation to not just the table, but the rows as well, then you fundamentally understood, one, the internet, but two, Amazon Marketing Cloud's just a different level of pivot table. You're just calling on all of this information at specific points in time versus the product table, the order table, the customer table, the ads table, etc. Yeah, as long as you know what question that you need answered, and you can really easily call out the parameters in which you want to call, a data scientist can help you figure the technical side of that equation out. But the challenge is really articulating the problem and the parameters you actually
I
need
agree.
to solve that problem.
Typically what I do when I'm talking to someone on the media side who's trying to figure out how to use Amazon Marketing Cloud is they'll ask me a question and I'll like open up a literal whiteboard and draw them a table. And it said, is this what you want?
Yeah.
And then I can figure out how to get what they need, but I have to show them sort of what's available to see if that helps them answer their question. So
That's a great
option 2 would be using a tool provider. The tool providers in the space, by and large, are all doing some variation of the same thing, which is they're saying there's some number of things out of the box that you can ask, and that's it, unless you pay us additional money to build you custom reports. Hope that doesn't sound pejorative, but that's what everyone is doing by and large.
Yeah, I've seen so many dashboard solutions. Yeah, and I'm like, guys, this is a very generic way of trying to solve the problem or trying to find the opportunity within Amazon Marketing Cloud, because it has no context of what my business challenge actually is. So you're trying to sell me a square peg for a round hole, and you're telling me it's going to work when I have a very specific use case, a very specific or a very different product category that is not very similar to most of the product categories that are sold on Amazon. Right?
Tool providers number 2.
Providers.
And I think that's why I took a totally different approach at building Noctis, which was my goal is to enable people to do custom first. Like you can ask it any question and it'll try to write you code that gets you the answer to that question. Not we're going to give you the 10 dashboards that we think are going to be most common. It's to help you figure out your custom questions on your own, because if all I did was give you the same stock dashboard, all I did to the industry was raise the floor. I didn't provide anyone competitive advantage. Yep. I just said, now everyone has the same dashboards and we're all starting from square one instead of square 0.
So you know how you just talked about whiteboarding the solution or whiteboarding the question and then referencing the parameters to actually answering that question. How does someone build up the skills to do that themselves? How do you improve that data fluency from a non-technical marketer point of view?
I think really the core skill is just understanding what data's in there. You could even take it further, like ask the person to draw you a chart. Say, if you were going to present this data to a client, what would the chart looks like that tells your story? And then we backsolve from the chart to the table and then the table to the code. And if you ask a marketer, what chart do you need on the slide? They typically can get pretty close to what they need because what they're used to is storytelling. And you just say, okay, what plot do you need to be able to tell in order to have this story work? And then you figure that out and backs off. I think part of that is also understanding what data is in there. I find with Amazon Marketing Cloud, what happens to most people is they get overwhelmed and they realize that there are all these questions they wish they could have answered, or they couldn't conceive that they could ask because they didn't know the data was available. So there's some sort of exploratory work that I've done, which is just describing to people what is in there. And then they can sort of understand, oh, I can ask for this and this and this and this because I know what the available parameters are. It's like trying to play Scrabble when you've never seen a dictionary before. It's a little bit hard.
For sure. I'm a super nerd, so I love reading data dictionaries for specific databases and stuff. So really get to the nuts and bolts of what is actually available. I think with Amazon Marketing Cloud, I think something similar is needed to kind of give, marketers a whirlwind crash course in terms of how to use this stuff outside of just looking at the dashboards, which is fine. But when you truly understand the audience signals, the media interactions, the path to purchase analysis, the number of exposures to conversion, when you see the level of granular detail that's even just available from the basic stuff, it blows your mind, right? Google Analytics kind of has this stuff when you think of direct-to-consumer e-commerce and the interactions that are being recorded within GA. But given the size and scale of Amazon and how much sales of multiple brands are going through Amazon, this is just different level of scale, which makes
it is definitely exciting. To finish off the question, option 3 is you work with your agency. Okay. And as you mentioned, MTS, the goal is to have an agency that can do both the math and the art. Or at Mars, we call it art and algorithm. which is very pithy.
Yep.
That being said, if your agency, like I've seen with a lot of folks, if your agency doesn't take the call from analytics because they're very expensive, I've seen frequently, luckily not at Mars, but working at other places or with other partners, hearing horror stories about people who said, hey, I can't get my agency's analytics team in the room because we don't have an extra $100,000 around for them to do something. And I'm like, there's analytics is now table stakes. It's not an add-on. It's not a nice to have. It's a must have. And watching agency partners do a disservice to their brands by scoping it independently as a extra line item, like sends me up the wall.
Yeah, that does make sense to me. Which is a good lead into the next question, which is, what are the hesitations that you're seeing from clients / sellers on Amazon in reference to using Amazon Marketing Cloud?
I think some people think it's too hard and they just sort of give up before they've given it an honest try, which if I was a non-technical person and you showed me the AMC native console, I think that's a fair reaction to say, I'm not going to be able to figure this out.
Yeah.
And I think the really big piece, which I harp on a lot, is the worst thing that can happen to me as an analytics professional is I do a really beautiful analysis, I put together a great story, and then no one changes their behavior. And I think that's what happens with AMC a lot, is folks say, hey, isn't it wonderful that your path to purchase goes through these campaigns in this order, and this is your best conversion path, and isn't that awesome to know? And then no one does anything differently. Which I was like, what was the point of this analysis if we didn't use it in a way that drives business impact? And I think most brands don't know how to take it to that next level and say, what's the action step? And their agency partners and their tool providers don't help them as much as they need.
Yeah. So, this is literally just another tool and just another way of, you seeing your data. But if you fundamentally don't take action from it and or change your behavior or change what you're doing, definition of insanity is expecting a different result doing the same stuff, right? So, so again, we're only going to get more as AI develops, as access to analytics develops, as we get faster and faster computers. The velocity of which this stuff will keep coming out is only going to increase. But fundamentally, if we don't make little tiny changes or big changes and then measure the impact of that change relative to what we were doing before, what's the point? So okay. Where do you see data clean room technology going, specifically with Amazon's announcements at Unboxed in terms of connecting everything to Amazon Marketing Cloud, AWS's partnerships now with Meta, Snapchat, TikTok, I think there was a couple more, as well as plugging in all of the video partners as well, like Freevee, Prime Video, and Thursday Night Football. As this ecosystem just keeps getting bigger, where do you see the technology heading?
I am probably going to give you an unorthodox take here. I think what I've heard a lot of people say is that there's going to be some sort of aggregation of clean rooms, a clean room of clean rooms, or how I like to think about it, like the one ring from Lord of the Rings, the one clean room to rule them all. That's not going to happen. Yep. Data privacy laws, and especially like GDPR and whatnot, don't allow you to use data for anything that the customer didn't consent to. And building a massive clean room of clean rooms is definitely one of those things they did not sign up for. So this idea that you're going to be able to have like universal identity graphs that are, have 90, 100% match rates across all of your partners, and you're going to track one consumer across the entire journey flawlessly and seamlessly, that's not going to happen. If anything, the opposite is going to happen. Even now on Amazon, the way Amazon identifies who you are is based on your status being logged in on Amazon.com, and they use that email to see who you are. And all of your campaigns that are targeted via audience track you around the web and show you ads based on your browsing behavior and what you've looked at. That being said, there are a large number of ads, like offsite contextual, so on and so forth, that target based on the content of the page, not who the person is. And therefore, when you look at the Amazon Marketing Cloud records, you see, I have an impression and I don't know who the person is. And if you say, what's the total number of impressions when I have a known user versus when I don't have a known user, the known user number or percentage is going to drop over time. And where that's going to lead is basically conversion modeling to say, can I take a wild guess or a scientifically informed guess, depending on who you ask, on can I figure out sort of kind of maybe without cookies who that person is, or what type of person that is, or what sort of things could I say about them? Like if I show them an ad that's contextually targeted to dog food, can I make a guess that they're in the in-market for dog food audience? Probably. And as Amazon Marketing Cloud and all data clean rooms get further down this path of third-party cookie deprecation, the ability to track users seamlessly across the web is going to become more and more broken, more and more fragmented, and you'll need more intense modeling to figure out in the instances where I know I served an ad and I don't know to whom, how do I figure out what happened?
The cookie deprecation piece, the following consumers around multiple parts of the internet when they're logged in or incognito and/or using privacy filters, etc., is only going to become more difficult, right? I think Amazon's play with using AWS clean rooms and letting AWS basically be the clean room provider of choice for multiple publishers and now social media networks as well is kind of Amazon's insurance policy against all of this stuff, right? And I think this is a very intelligent play to, at least in the Western markets, have a strong defense against cookie deprecation and at least marry up so much of the media sphere, the publisher sphere, as well as obviously the e-commerce sphere as well, and try and keep people as closed loop as they can within Amazon's infrastructure. Now, how Amazon navigates the privacy part of this and the consent matching across all of this stuff, I think their PR lobbies and a lot of their industry influencers have a bit of work to do here. But I think this is the strongest play to marry all of this stuff together so far within.
I totally agree. Thankfully, there are lawyers that get paid a lot more than I do and are smarter than me that will figure this stuff out.
Super cool. Let's transition into analytics and AI. How have you seen AI transform the landscape of retail media and analytics so far?
I think what we're seeing with AI is really just step one of where AI can go. I think when we conceptualize AI, the sort of seismic change it is at least on par with the advent of mobile, if not the advent of the internet. And I know that might sound like I'm overselling it, but I think we're still very much at the early stages of what that's going to look like, right? For media, I think we've seen a lot of folks start with AI-generated content. Like Amazon released a feature that allows you to basically prompt an image generation LLM that says, take my product image and put it on my kitchen counter surrounded by a Thanksgiving meal for my toaster oven, whatever it is. And we'll see AI content continue to improve. Amazon's also released AI review summaries to allow the consumer to say, what's the gist of all of these reviews in aggregate? I think what we're seeing right now is our use cases where AI is very good, out of the box, which is simple image generation, summarization. Where it's not so good out of the box is complex generation or anything that requires fact checking or technical knowledge. It's a little bit less good. With analytics, what I've seen that's really quite interesting is how far you can get using, for example, ChatGPT to, especially its code interpreter, to push the envelope of what someone who isn't as data fluent can get out of their data set with some help from an LLM. If you ask it the right questions, it'll generate the code that gives you the response you need, which creates what I would describe as a plethora of citizen data scientists. It doesn't scale. It's not a model that you can, build into an enterprise-wide application, but it does give people the tools to get much further on their own out of the box. One thing I would add to this is what's going to come around the corner and that most people aren't prepared for is prompt-driven or text-driven LLM-based search. Our conception of the digital shelf, which is like a series of tiles of product images, is potentially fundamentally broken by someone going into ChatGPT and saying, what's the best orange juice for me to buy for breakfast? And the LLM delivering you a single response of this product rather than showing you the entire plethora of options.
Or even just your 4 options rather than one, right? Like, or 20 on a product product listing page on Amazon, right? Like, how do you influence that? Is going to be super interesting. I think, again, Amazon's play with Alexa, and I made sure I turned off my Alexa before we had this conversation, because every time we talk about Alexa, she goes off. But even with Alexa and more Alexa screens being available, I think it's a perfect use case of a chat interface leveraging search and being more conversational when it comes to purchasing decisions for consumer as well. So, and that's going to be my new cut too, by the way. Super cool. So, as a product manager, how did you leverage AI to enhance product operations and decision-making processes within the work that you do?
I think AI is a really great sounding board. It's very good at, so I've been trying to adopt, to back up one step, some sort of Amazonian processes about the PRD, the sort of writing the press release before you ship it, before you write any code. And I found that that sort of writing helps to codify your own thinking. Even better is when you feed that into an LLM. It's just going to take your thoughts and sort of flesh it out and give it back to you. And basically, if I handed someone a bullet point list of my ideas and it were to write the press release for me, would that press release make sense? And if the answer is no, then my thoughts aren't very clear. And LLMs are great amplifiers of what you feed it. And they sort of fill in the gaps with what like an average person might fill in the gaps with. And if they fill in the gaps incorrectly, that's probably because you gave it like incomplete or imperfect lines of thought. And I found that super helpful.
That's really interesting, Jack, because the beauty of being a good communicator is being able to communicate things with a lot of simplicity, and an LLM kind of gives you that, right? Simplicity, because it's operating for the masses. As long as the input that you're giving it is unique enough that it stokes something new, brand new and creative, then the language of the LLM kind of helps you get to the simplest way of communicating that.
And if you put in something
really
too
cool.
generic, it fills in the blanks with something super generic. And you're like, this sounds like an undifferentiated idea, and I don't know what this means.
Super cool. Okay, so what are some of the biggest challenges you faced in terms of integrating AI into analytics, and how did you address?
I think some of the biggest concerns that we're going to have with sort of enterprise applications of AI, specifically like third-party large language models, is going to be data privacy. The big challenge is, how do you enable folks to use these technologies without divulging their data to the owner of the LLM or some other system that enables the LLM to learn from your data and potentially regurgitate your results to someone else? So we sort of approach this in 2 ways. One is thinking about how much value can I provide using an LLM that knows about the problem generically, but not about your specific data. So the way we set up Noctis was, it knows about Amazon Marketing Cloud. It knows nothing about your data. It doesn't even have access to your data. So you can ask it, how do I see my top 10 products that drive new to brand sales? And it'll help you with that. It just doesn't know what the answer is because it doesn't have access to your data, which sort of firewalls it from saying, I'm Pepsi, what are the top 10 best-selling products for Coke? And having the response come back with a real answer. The other way you could solve this that we've been working on too is what I would describe as containerization. Maybe that's not the right technical term, but the idea that you, on a per client basis or a per account basis, you've basically built a self-contained LLM that knows about whatever the generic data set is, plus this advertiser's unique data set and nothing else. So you don't have that risk of advertiser A learning about advertiser B. We've gotten guidance from a lot of clients that they don't want their data in LLMs at all. So if you're trying to leverage this technology, I would definitely recommend thinking about, what can you do with AI that doesn't involve ingesting customer data that's still valuable. And what customer data means depends on who you're talking to. It could be the existing bullet points on your PDP could be considered customer data. So like even for the simplest tasks of generating PDP content, you need to make sure you're within the rules of engagement you set up within your brand or with your clients if you're an agency or a tool provider.
That's really interesting. I mean, from my point of view, all of that stuff is public, right? Like it's published in the open web. There are a million scraping providers, scraping Amazon on a daily basis. So like, for someone to pull an Excel spreadsheet out of top 20 ASINs in category X with all of the bullet points, links to the A plus, B plus images and the content associated with all of that, it's a relatively basic and easy exercise to do. But I hear your point in terms of being very careful in terms of, I don't think it's just customer information, it's more like sensitive commercial information being ingested into an LLM and then, being aggregated and published elsewhere. But it's more so, this stuff is here. It's a race to find the use cases and the value. What risk are you willing to take in order to find that value? That's the call that most corporations are trying to make today is, do we go softly and be a follower rather than a leader within this space because the risks are too high? Or do we lean in very heavily to find the use cases and to find the value?
If I were to start a new company with my clone, I'd want to start a company that basically does LLM and AI implementation for enterprise. That all you do is you go in and say, hey, this LLM stuff is scary. Here's how we do it with all your privacy concerns addressed. And you can make a lot of money that way.
Yeah, of course. And one easy approach is to, I say easy, it's easy to say, I'm sure the technical people will tell me I'm crazy. But one other way is basically masking and pseudonymizing your data, right? So if you're uploading customer data, you can hash all of that out or make up names and then de-identify it. Keep all of the purchasing and transactional history, consistent, but pseudonymize that data so no one else can actually make any meaningful information out of it. But at least from running a model point of view, you can see the impact of, your media activity, for example, against your user base. So there are lots of approaches to it. It just comes down to how open are you to the risk?
For sure. I think the LLM and AI approach is going to be one of those things where, two guys in a garage can build a $500 million company. And if you're an existing CPG and two guys in a garage can build a bigger company than you have, you should be wary of not adopting this technology.
For sure. With your unique educational background in music and opera, how does this influence your approach to analytics and AI in this business context? And more specifically, how would you recommend someone with a background in e-commerce get started in specializing in the analytics space?
I think what people think about product managers and analytics professionals and what they think about musicians, if you've ever seen those alignment charts of like what I do versus what other people think I do, product managers and professional musicians have very similar charts. I think what most people think product managers do is they yell at software engineers and release really cool features. And then they take all the credit and they feel very popular and they wear a black turtleneck and stand in front of a giant projector. And I think most people think professional musicians perform and they get up there and they sing it on the huge stage and they have adoring fans, right? What they actually do as a professional musician is you spend 90% of your time practicing alone in a room by yourself. And that process of practicing is one that requires ruthless precision to say, you're the only person in this room that can give you feedback. How do you develop the skills of active listening and introspection and diagnosis to say something went wrong? What are the possible core things that I know are the inputs that make this thing happen? How do I diagnose this problem? How do I solve it on its own? And then realizing that music is an art form where it could never, ever be good enough, or it can never be perfect. It can only be good enough. And how do you basically self-diagnose in a way that you actually unsupervised build that muscle of self-improvement? It also causes people to have what I would describe as either extremely strong or extremely weak egos. That process of like ruthless self-analysis breaks people. There's only so much negative self-talk you can say, oh, that was bad, oh, that was bad, before you've crushed yourself. And the folks who are doing it most successfully, by and large, have figured out how to compartmentalize in a way that says, when my singing isn't going perfectly, it's not because I'm a bad person. And I know that sounds silly, but it's very easy in our professional lives to conflate our professional success with our personal worth. And as a musician, you get really used to that, like either being the thing that breaks your career or the thing that drives your success, because you're the person who's most able to go into the practice room and say, I'm going to build this better than it was yesterday. And it doesn't matter if all my fans and my teachers and my mentors thought it was amazing. I know there's incremental gain I can get. And being a product manager is very similar, right? You are the person who's saying the bar can be set externally. Like maybe I get, I went from 0 to $100 million in ARR in a short time frame. And you need to be the person to tell yourself self-critically, those accolades don't mean anything. I'm the person who decides what good for me is. And I need to go out there and make that happen.
Yep.
And feel that drive without the sort of external measures of success being the driving factor. Like if you wanted to go and make money, or if you wanted to go and get famous, being a professional musician or a product manager are not the easiest ways. I think also what professional musicians do that I think we all need to take into business context is that level of practice and preparedness is sort of industry standard. Like if you show up, like I've seen happen, if you show up to the first what's called first day school, you show up to the first rehearsal of a gig and you're not prepared, you will get fired, like on the spot. And because if you're singing, for example, some relatively common opera like Don Giovanni, and you're singing a role, you get fired because you don't know your music. There are 100 other people that are a phone call away that could fly in tomorrow and do it because they know the music. So the level of professionalism that you need to have just to get in the room is really high.
It's very high.
I think we all we get busy in our business lives and we fly by the seat of our pants and we say, oh, I'll just go to this meeting and sort of figure it out as I go. That's something that we all need to do better at. As a professional musician, you'd get fired on the first day. You've met my old boss when I was at PackView, Riyadh, you do. And our first meeting together, when I was like the first our one-on-one we had, he was like, hey, the number one rule we have as a team was no winging it. And as a musician, he and I are both musicians. He plays bass, I sang. We were like, okay, we would never show up to a gig and not know our music. So you would never show up in professional context and have done your homework, right? And I just see this happen too much, and this is something that I wish people did a little bit better job at.
I love watching documentaries on like superstar athletes and just superstars in general. One of my favorite ones is I think it was in Jiro Love Sushi, where he goes and sees this Japanese soba noodle chef who's like the top soba noodle chef in Japan. And the guy has been at the top of his game for 20 plus years. And when they're interviewing him, he wakes up in the morning and every day he has a routine in terms of how he cuts his soba noodle. And he says, one day I will perfect my craft. And he's been doing the exact same thing for 20 years straight, right? And when you see that level of diligence, discipline, and, practicing your craft on a daily basis to make sure that you're still at the tip of the spear, it's only commendable, right? Like, you want to operate with people who are at that level consistently all the time.
Yeah, it's definitely something that seems non-concrete, but it's definitely like helped me transition from music to e-commerce and product. Because as someone who's relatively new to the industry, there's no way I can know everything. I can be the most prepared, and that's just something that you can that's like a grind rather than a like innate skill. I think we like need to collectively reflect on like what things that are our own successes are due to innate talent versus effort. I think you'll find that the majority of the time things are due to effort, not from innate talent.
Of course, I think it's a balance between the two, and obviously having talent is a gift, but it's no amount of gifts can excuse hard work.
Yeah. So the second question you had, which was about how do you get into e-commerce and learn about analytics, is a lot of drinking from a fire hose, I must say. I think the places I would start would be, like, you can get by and do a lot, just like learning Excel and SQL and some dashboarding tool. Like, if you are a data analyst, that's probably the majority of the skill set you'll need to get moving. If you want to get further down the road and start building models in Python or R, or using some more advanced technologies, that's definitely open to you. But I think the first thing I would do is just like go learn the basics of SQL. And thinking about the basics of SQL, I found has been, because I had to learn it from scratch too, was a really helpful way for me to conceptualize how data works and how it's structured and how to access it. And thinking about, like, when I describe data to people, I accidentally frequently describe it as SQL in my brain. Because it's just the way I've like learned now to logic through, like, how do I get the data I need from this thing? I think that would be the best place to start. Be kind to yourself. It's not going to happen all at once. You'll make mistakes. It's not going to be perfect the first time, but just going out there and trying will be very useful. And if you have SQL skills, even, intermediate SQL skills, you are much more valuable as an employee to any company because you can get your own data and figure out what it means without any help. So would recommend that to anyone in any field. If you have any data that you potentially could touch, SQL is a good skill to have.
So based on your experiences, what emerging trends in AI do you foresee having the most impact, specifically on retail media and analytics in the near future?
I think LLM search is going to be really powerful. I think we will really have to see whether the giants of traditional digital media, being search and social, are going to basically self-disrupt with these technologies. Like, is Google going to throw out AdWords to say our search is actually completely LLM driven? And my hunch is there are strong forces saying no, but the universe is saying yes. I think we'll have to see, like, will the incumbents figure out how to self-disrupt before they are disrupted themselves? Because what we're seeing in the industry is building an LLM is so expensive. It favors incumbents to some degree, but the incumbents need to be willing to basically blow up the bridge that got them to where they are.
Or work out a financial model that still works for them, right? Like,
yeah, I think that's going to be really, really interesting to see how that unfolds. Basically, I am hesitant to say it'll happen, but I feel like if I were to place my bets on what's going to happen, there will be only a few sort of incumbent technology providers that are operating towards this AGI or AGI sort of approach, and then a wide variety of vertical specific LLMs or AI tools that are saying, I only know about XYZ type of data, and that's what I'm going to focus on. Something to help lawyers write things, or for marketing, something that helps you write PDP copy is something you can get really specific and train a model to do better than any other model, but then it's not used for everything else, right? I think we're going to find those sorts of specialist models start to pop up that pick a very narrow sliver, what you can do within an e-commerce business, and say, I'm just going to build that. like sort of what I've built that says I'm just going to write code for Amazon Marketing Cloud, which is pretty niche, and say I'm just going to nail that one, and I'm not going to worry about writing poetry or PvP content.
Cool. So on a personal front, Jack, what habits and productivity hacks make your life easier?
I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts. Every time I'm commuting or walking anywhere or in the gym or in the supermarket, I'm listening to a podcast. I find I don't like sit still enough to read. I'm just like listening to a podcast is how I kept trying to learn new things and stay up to date. Definitely go listen to the other podcasts that MTS has been on or has published himself. They're a good listen. I can shamelessly plug you.
Which other ones would you recommend?
The podcasts I really like. I like 20 VC with Harry Stebbings. I like Lenny's podcast, which is about product management. The Y Combinator team has a really good podcast. The A16Z team at Andreessen Horowitz has a very good podcast. And then I also listen to a few political podcasts, like the All In podcast, which talks about like politics and tech. And then I listen to Breaking Points pretty frequently as well.
Very cool. I have a book recommend. I know you don't read, so just find this book on Audible. The book recommendation is The Hard Thing About Hard Things. It's a book by Ben Horowitz from A to Z, and there's a specific 2-3 pages in that book called Good Product Manager, Bad Product Manager. If you just Google the product manager, bad product manager, you find it. You'll find the excerpt online on the A16 website. But it basically goes through the good behaviors of a good product manager versus the bad behaviors of a bad product manager. And Ben Horowitz actually produced this document and gave it to, I think it was 16 odd product managers that he had reporting to him, half of whom he thought were ridiculous and people that he was going to fire. And out of those 8 odd people, I'm butchering the numbers, but out of the 8 people, 6 of them read that document and understood what he was actually looking for as a manager, and they improved dramatically. 2 people he wanted to get rid of anyway, and they didn't get it, and they didn't change. But I think communicating what you want in a team is a very good thing that a lot of leaders don't do very well. So yeah, definitely I would recommend you have a look at that book and in particular that section.
I'll definitely take a read.
To close out, Jack, how can people reach out to you?
So best way to reach out to me is on LinkedIn. I'm posting there, a couple times a week about Amazon Marketing Cloud or Noctis and updating people about what I'm thinking. You can also track down the Mars Agency at themarsagency.com or take a look at Noctis at analyticindex.com/Noctis if you'd like to learn more and sign up for a trial and give it a whirl.
Super cool. All right. Thank you for coming on the show, Jack. Pleasure to have you anytime, and all the best with all of the endeavors that you are currently on. Would love to have you on the show, let's say in a year's time, to hear developments on Noctis, developments on you.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Super cool. Thank you.